Let's take a look at the graphic text reading portion of the Ontario Literacy Test. In this video, I'll go through what the question is, what the readings look like, and then we'll talk about some strategies to help you improve your score. Let's get started. So the graphic text reading can be a number of things. It could be a diagram, a table, posters and websites and schedules and all of these things. It's very often something you would see in your real life. So the example of a subway map is something you actually need to be able to read in your life. It's going to definitely have at least one image. That image could be a graph or a chart or something, but that's what makes it a graphic text. There's an image. It's one page. You're going to often have multiple pieces of information. There has been a few in past literacy tests that are kind of a little bit simpler, but more recently, a lot of them have a lot of different information going on. Of course, that's the complicated part that kind of challenges you. You're very often going to see movement, some kind of flow, or maybe it's all centered around one image. And sometimes, not always, you'll have some kind of legend or key that gives you information about how to read the text. Let's look at a sample. Let's take a look at a sample. Here's a graphic text that was on one of the previous literacy tests. And you can see there's a lot going on. So certainly we saw those images. There's an example. We've talked about graphs. There's one in there. We talked about, I mentioned, there's a lot going on, and this is a great example of that. You've got kind of your main heading up here, energy use, and all of a sudden you've got this graph, and then down here you've got kind of a completely different section. We talked about legends or keys. So here's an example here, units of power. It's explaining to you what a kilowatt and a megawatt is. So yeah, it's a good example of a graphic text. This one's a little more complicated than some of the others I've seen, but it's a good example to start thinking about what they look like. So what are your strategies when reading these graphic texts? Well, the first thing is recognize the structure. And that was the idea of, is there a flow? Is there movement? So if there's a flow, kind of recognize how that goes. Is it kind of everything pointing into the middle? Is it moving through a series of graphs or a series of images? Is it just different sections? Is there kind of, like we saw in the previous sample, kind of a top section with a couple of graphs and then a main bottom section? You'll be able to recognize that by looking for headings, and that of course is the text that's going to be bigger than other parts. And other than recognizing the structure, the other big strategy for graphic text is skim. Look through it quickly and then get right to the questions. You don't want to take time reading the whole graphic text. A lot of times there's information in there that you will never even need to answer the questions. So just quickly look through it and get an idea where everything is, and then rather quickly get right into the questions. Don't waste time reading all of the details, imagine if you're kind of looking at all the parts of a graph and saying, oh, that's 25%, you'll waste way too much time. So skim through it quickly and get to the questions. So if we go through our sample again, if I were skimming, this is what I would do if I were taking this test. I would look at the title first. That we know is the title because it's nice and big. Energy use in Ontario 2013. Okay, great. I got a quick idea. This is about energy use. I would recognize this as some kind of introduction. Probably wouldn't read it really. I would look here at the graph, okay, electricity production and conservation, okay, and I can quickly see wind and bioenergy. I don't need to read them all. I don't care about the numbers. I'll come back to that. I'm going to then notice there's a second section in here. This is looking at the title. Of course, it's bigger. The text is bigger. Household energy use. Okay, great. And then I see that there's a graph of household energy use, and I can see, what do I see? Oh, years. Okay, so I know this is some kind of going through the years. And then here's a legend that's going to help me. So if I come back to that graph, and then I see that third section, how much energy is in a kilowatt hour? Oh, okay. So this isn't quite explaining the energy use. This is, it is kind of giving me an explanation rather than giving me the results. And I can see what's going on here. Surf the web for 5. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, intro here. And that's it. What did that take? 20 seconds? 30 seconds. Took me a little more time because I'm explaining what I'm doing, but if I do that on the test, I do that in 10 seconds. I just go through, okay, energy use in Ontario, Okay, introduction, great. Okay, here's a graph about protection and conservation. Okay, the different types of energy, wind and conservation, hydro. Okay, great. Second section, household energy use. Okay, I can see the years on the graph, so it's going to be the energy use throughout history. And my third section is how much energy is in a kilowatt hour. There, I just did one for you as an example. That took me 10 seconds. Now, when I get to the questions, I'm ready. If it's a question about, what is the most energy used in Ontario? Oh, maybe it's nuclear. Or, how much energy did Ontario households use in 2010? Oh, I know I'm going to come into this graph here. Or, how much energy does it take to iron 3 shirts? Or how much energy is in a kilowatt hour? I know that's here. So I'm ready to come back to my sample. That's the key about skimming. Look for it where everything is. Again, I didn't read this. I mean, I'm probably never going to read this intro. I might never read this either. I might get all my questions just from the graphs. I don't know. So there's no sense wasting time with that information I'm probably or maybe not going to use. So what types of questions are you going to get for the graphic text? Well, you're going to get 6 multiple choice questions. And like a lot of the readings on the literacy test, you're going to have a whole mix of different types of questions. The main ones that are a little bit different or kind of a little bit more common, specific detail. So going into a graph and finding a detail. So, what was the amount in 2010 or what percentage was hydropower? Actually finding a detail. And that really kind of tests your ability to find information in a graph or a table or a chart or whatever it might be. You're also going to see trends. So because there is that flow often, or there's that kind of organization, you're going to get a question about some kind of trend. In the example that we saw, that could be something like, has energy use in Ontario gone up or down? Has it increased or decreased? And we saw the use per year kind of moving, and you'd have to be able to evaluate that from a graph. Then you're going to get all the standards that are in a lot of the other readings, vocabulary and context. So they're going to take a question and a word, and you're gonna have to give a definition for that. Author intent, a lot of this will be more graphical things. So like, why did the author include this table? Why was this number included? Why was this legend or key included? What was the purpose of that? So thinking about why they would include something in a text. As always, you're gonna have some inferences, and this is just taking the information from the graph or the table or the chart and kind of making a deduction or making a prediction. A good inference here in our example would be, okay, if energy use is declining, then you could make the inference, oh, what will it be like in 2030? Or what will it be like in 10 years? Oh, it's going to be lower than today. Organization is going to be that organization of the text. So in our example, we saw the 3 main sections, and it could ask you, is it kind of a flow? Is it all centered on one main image? Is it broken into sections? That was the answer for our example in this video. And then writing functions, or in this case, graphic functions. So, what is this chart for, or what does this image show, or what does this table tell you? And again, it's just getting you to show your understanding of a graphic text. So that's graphic text. You saw an example, you saw kind of an overview of what they will look like, and then you saw some strategies, how to read them, and also thought a bit about some of the questions and what the common questions are. Follow some of those strategies, certainly practice with graphic text, and if you can follow all the tips in this video, you should be able to get a great score.